Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Soul Rising podcast. We are all in on love, loss, and connection here. I'm so glad that you've decided to join me and my wonderful guest for another episode. Today, I have the wonderful Jose Lugo. He is an author of Love, Faith, and Violence, a true song and story. He's also a speaker, a founder of We Are All One Story, and has dedicated his life to sharing his experiences and helping others own their life stories to live a better life. So, Jose, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is awesome. And I was on Jose's show last summer, was it maybe? Was it that long ago? Wow, time's flying.
Yeah, time flies.
Yeah, it was the summer. Yeah, Jose has you have an extremely powerful story. I read your book and I was just blown away by your ability to tell the truth, to be honest, to put things in perspective. It was really moving. I really appreciate the work that you're doing out there. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and kind of what inspired you to start We Are All One Story and kind of what that encompasses?
Yes. So, for the past 5 years, I've traveled across the United States and different places in the world, just sharing people's stories pretty much. Everybody would get asked generally the same set of questions. And within those questions, we would try and get to the emotional undercurrent of whatever experience came up. And the goal of all the storytelling was to get people to see and myself to see. I think, deep down I needed to see this. Um, the emotional similarities we all have, the things that bring us together, the things that make us not feel alone, the things that do unite us as one. And our external experiences are going to differ and they all look different. And,
Mhm.
and we may think we can't relate to a lawyer or a politician or the garbage man, but if you start asking them about their stories and we get beneath that into how they felt within their experiences, it's pretty much very similar. And you get to see not just that individual person, articulating their story and being unique themselves, but within their own emotions, you see yourself. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So, the whole reason for sharing stories was to bring those things that unite us together to the forefront and to let people know that their story matters, that their story is worth sharing.
I love that. I love that you're seeking to find the commonalities because so often in today's day, right? I mean, we're like, there's just so much division. There's just so much disconnection. I like the phrase you used, emotional undercurrent. It's pretty much the same. So, in your experience with interviewing people, what is that commonality? Can you point to like a few traits or a few experiences that show up over and over?
Well, there's a few things that stand out, right? If we're talking about the emotional undercurrent, what I mean by that is when someone's describing grief, it's generally the same. When someone's describing anger, it's generally the same. When we're describing these things we're feeling, we can all identify with that. It's not like, oh, I've never felt anger. I've never felt betrayal. I've never felt, whatever it may be. Um, so that's always there within all of us, and we forget that. And a lot of times we don't want to feel that within ourselves because those are the hard parts of our story to recollect and recall. And a lot of times those feelings are uncomfortable. We don't want to sit with that. And I think when we do that, we don't just close ourselves off to ourselves, but we close ourselves off to a whole part of somebody else. And so that's kind of what I mean by the emotional undercurrent. As far as one of the things, the similarities that I learned within sharing stories, it's quite a few at this point. I learned that we all desire love deeply. Like every person I've asked to describe love has described it in a way that they desire. Even if the words don't do it justice, the general gist is like, hey, I believe there's some sort of love out there and it's grand and I want that. That's articulated obviously in different ways amongst everyone who share their stories, but that one sticks out. Another thing that I learned sharing these stories is the resiliency of the human spirit. I've had people sit across the chair from me and talk about some pretty atrocious things that happened to them, whether that's being raped, molested, um, trauma starting from a young age. I would always start the recording with asking them what their childhood dreams were. And then when we got to the end of their story, I would ask, what are your dreams now as an adult?
Hmm.
And regardless of what we just went through within their story, whether that being all the traumas, the hurts, and we go through some good parts too, because there's a balance to that, but people still dream and aspire to do more and to have a better life. And that in and of itself, I think, is an inbuilt strength in all of us, that we're more strong than we know. I mean, to sit there and share about all these things that happen to you that can justifiably make you a very bitter person,
Hmm.
but instead at the end, everyone chooses to dream again, to put something out there like, yeah, I do want this. And to me, that's always a testament to the strength of the human spirit who's sitting across from me.
As you're speaking, the phrase hope eternal just popped in my head. That's what it is. That is that drive of that human spirit you're discussing. Like sometimes we get beaten down and we're just like low and we're depressed and we're feeling defeated or whatever. But think for most people, that resilience shows up. We just have this desire to keep going.
Mm.
And that is kind of what attracted me to you and your story and what you do. And can we talk a little bit about your book
Yeah, of
and
course.
your own personal story? Because I want people to go read your book because you're like, you know, just a miracle. You're a miracle. Like from where you came from the experiences you had in your childhood to who you are today, you are beyond inspirational to me. And I hope that there are men out there who are listening who can take your story and help them to put their own story in the light of it doesn't have to hold me down.
Mm.
It can inspire me, motivate me to be better, to be everything that we're made to be. When we're here, we get just like bogged down with those childhood experiences and that pain and that trauma. But you're a fighter, and I want to hear more about it from you. So, Jose's book is called Love, Faith, and Violence, A True Song and Story. So, tell us a little bit about why you decided to write the book, first of all, and your experiences that are in there, a little bit that's in there.
Yeah, yeah. So I always kind of and maybe thought about getting my story out there. But that was a dream I let go of a long time ago. I've always seen myself talking to groups of people and doing things somewhat of what I'm doing now.
Hmm.
And, life happens and I let go of those dreams. My book is a memoir about my story. So essentially, I'll just share about my story. And it's pretty much what my book is about. I grew up in the inner city of Los Angeles, California. My parents divorced when I was 5. After my parents divorced, my mom became very physically abusive. And, its severity would fluctuate, but it was consistent throughout my late teens. I remember the first time that my mom did hit me, and it wasn't just hit me, it was my mom tied me up and then hit me with the cord and then kind of left me tied up. And, it was just such a complex situation for a kid to understand. I just felt hurt, betrayed. And at that point, I think I began to see the world differently. I began to see the world not as safe. If you can't trust your mom, if you can't trust your primary caregiver, I mean, who can you trust? And but still, I'm still a kid and the resiliency is still there in all of us. So, as it's not all doom and gloom. I had my sisters and my mom, for given her physical abuse, she did provide for us and she did make a very strong effort to do the best she could with what she could. However, I didn't understand that growing up.
Sure.
Um, I just kind of felt the hurt and I just really resented my mom. And I grew up that way. And during that, I thought that my dad coming back home I believe that he would come back home. Like probably most kids believe when their parents get divorced. I'd go to sleep at night and I'd pray for him to come back home. And one day I woke up in my early teens, and that's how long it took, from being 5 years old, wanting him and longing for him to come back home, thinking that that would fix everything. But I woke up and I was like, damn, he's not coming.
Mm.
And I think at that point it was like, okay, this is life. The dreams kind of went away. There's not just violence in my home, like there's violence when I walk out the door. There's poverty outside the door. This is just life, and this is what it is what it is pretty much. Like
Uh-huh.
there's no up, there's no down. This is where you're at. And that's a gray area that is tough to really rise above that. And I stopped dreaming. I was just surviving.
How old
Yeah.
were you about that time? Whether
I
you
would
can.
say when I gave up on my dad coming back,
Mhm.
maybe 13, 14.
Those are pivotal years, right?
you
When you
know?
need that support and that structure.
Um, so yeah, so my dad wasn't around. My sisters were always you know, we kind of kept each other above water emotionally. Just, the love of your siblings kind of does a lot. The love of anybody near to you does a lot. And, my mom was busy working and doing surviving herself with 6 kids.
Yeah.
My mom immigrated from Sinaloa, Mexico, the cartel capital of the world.
Oh, yeah.
and and she came with her own shit.
Yeah.
And I've heard stories of what she went through, that got her to get up and come over here, and
Yeah.
those issues still haven't been addressed, but
Yeah.
um
That generation, it's really hard to weigh that armor.
um so yes, I got into high school. I was pretty much a weird kid, during lunch I would just go in the restroom and sit in the restroom stall and just didn't fit in. I didn't feel comfortable around like trying to fit in either. I didn't know how to navigate that. But I joined the football team, and
Mhm.
I was it was an outlet to put on pads and get to hit somebody full speed. Like
Yeah.
it felt good. And I wasn't the best player. I was actually pretty bad, but I had a lot of heart, and I would go full speed, and I would not hesitate to, put hard hits on people and stuff like that. Other players on the team took a liking to me because of that. And those players happened to be gang members.
Mm.
Um, they were specifically Crips, LA Crips, and I liked it. For me, it was the first time kind of fitting in. By not fitting in, like, it being in a group where it's like people don't like you, people aren't gonna like us anyways.
Mm.
So finally having my first, like, what I thought were real friends, um, was everything to me, to be honest. It was an escape from the home. And when we're hanging out and, obviously there's fights, there's violence, there's a lot of those things when you're hanging around, certain groups. And I didn't mind participating in it. I didn't mind participating in the violence. It was cathartic for me,
Mhm.
whether I won or lost.
Mhm.
Like it felt the same. I couldn't physically tell the difference between a win or a loss. Like the rush was
Mm.
the
Mhm.
same. So that in of itself was kind of like that's just how twisted I had like everything had kind of gotten for me, and my morals became pretty skewed. And when those acts of violence did happen as a late teen, right? It's still in high school, and I didn't really feel bad, because I thought this was normal. Like my mom beat me worse than this.
Mhm. Mhm.
If there's violence in the home and then there's violence out here, I guess this is okay.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, and it was also a way to mask all my hurt. I'd rather have I'd rather have you see a persona or you see a threat than see the hurt kid in me
Yeah.
or to speak to that hurt kid. Um, so after high school, after 6 months after I graduated, I go on a crime spree. I'm part of multiple robberies, start off with small ones, work up to a little bit bigger ones. And, during those robberies, some people were held at gunpoint. People were certainly traumatized. Nobody was hurt, thank God. People were hurt in different ways.
Yeah.
Um, and when I got arrested, it was a slow speed chase. There's helicopters, there's more cops than I'd ever seen. It was surreal. It was surreal. When I get to the holding cell of the LA County Jail, you know, one of the thoughts that I had was, well, this is being, I'm still a kid, but I was like, my mom can't hurt me from in here. And I felt in a way a sort of a freedom from that.
Hmm.
And I'll never forget that moment. Like, okay, I'm in jail. I mean, this is also the thought process of a kid, but it was like, okay, we're not dealing with that anymore.
Hmm.
I'm just dealing with what's in front of me. One of the other things in jail that I was more afraid of, oddly, was, not the violence. I'd already been used and conditioned for violence, but it was, again, if someone would speak to that hurt kid inside, like if someone would verbally know the things to say that could
Yeah.
break me down.
Yeah.
If someone brings up, oh, your mom, your dad, you're just like, if someone had said those things to me, like that would have that's worse than getting in a physical altercation.
Mm. So
Um,
the emotional wounds
the
are more
emotional wounds,
painful than the
yeah,
physical ones.
those still hurt more.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, jail, the LA County jail and the California prison system is more consistent violence.
Hmm.
Um, I got a 5-year sentence. Out of the 5, I did slightly over 4. I was in the maximum security yard for a chunk of that time. I ran with the blacks in there. I ran with the Crips specifically, and that in of itself is a whole nother story.
Yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah, and but when I got out, I didn't have a plan. I didn't have like, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay,
Right.
I'm out, and I was a little bit scared. I was not probably not a little bit. I was like really scared. Like, what am I gonna do out here? And I paroled back to my neighborhood, and I was on parole for 2 years back in my city. And during this time, my dad, whom I never formed a relationship with, had consistently reached out saying that if I ever wanted to get my life together, I can move out with him and get to know him. And he has, my 3 little brothers, and get to know the rest of the family. And my pride and ego, even as a kid, was like, yeah, no, I'm good. But eventually, push came to shove, and I needed to leave LA, and I took him up on that offer. And I went and I lived with him for 4 years as a grown ex-con,
Wow.
right? And
Wow.
and I can't say that he imparted some great wisdom to me or anything like that, right? But what I can say is within those 4 years, I couldn't deny that he loved me in his way, but that he really loved me in his own way. You don't let somebody live with you for that long, and especially a grown adult, um, if you don't.
Yeah.
And when I had that realization, like, and it wasn't mental, it was emotional, and I felt that in my heart, like it was a realization, like, damn, as messed up as my dad is with his own issues, right? He has his own life that I can't deny at this point, given the facts that he's shown me, that his love for me has always been there, even though it was
Yes.
flawed. And that was a big healing point for me because I had that moment for my mom while I was in prison because she was there. So regardless of the violence, like I was also there to witness her in and outs of paying the bills, of working and all that stuff. So I'd already forgiven her in my own way. My dad, I didn't know, I didn't know if the love was real. I thought he did, but I didn't really know. So
Well, there's a
y-
part in your book, I just want to mention this, that really, uh, just killed was all the times that you and your sisters were waiting for him to come pick you up,
mm,
and you would see the cars and you would think, okay, this is going to be it. He's going to show, this is going to be it. I forget what kind of car you were waiting for, but there was a specific car you were looking out for, and he just never came. And that just killed me,
yeah, that's
And
messed up.
yeah, and you speaking to it really is. I love that you could laugh about it. It's great. And speaking to our parents' own shit, like they got their shit and they are just humans. And yeah, I mean, violence and abuse is not okay. But at some point, we can realize that they do love us. I think it's pretty hard to be a parent and not love your child. I, unless you're like a, psychopath or socio or something where like you're just incapable of it. But for most normal people, sane people, I guess, you can't not love your child. You don't have any children yet, right, Jose?
No, no.
Yeah. So I have 2 girls, and it feels to me like impossible to not be able to love a child, but how our parents show their love or showed their love were just in ways that we couldn't receive, especially as children. But for you to realize, well, my mom's going to work, she's paying the bills, she's got a roof over her head, she's doing what she has to do, that was her way of loving you, even though she was suffering with her own emotional wounds and trauma, which made her abusive. Um, that's huge. That's very enlightened for a kid or a teenager to realize. Kudos to you for that. So I just wanted to bring that up, that one part in your book that just killed me. I was like, just come pick him up. Just don't get him. Okay, so I'm sorry. So continue.
Okay, so yeah, that is heartbreaking, but apparently a bunch of kids go through that. I've heard
Yeah.
I've yeah, like the
I have a friend who
yeah.
I'm actually I wrote like a short little potential prologue for like another book about abandonment, and my one friend, we were in ACA together, adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families, and her story is sitting on her suitcase
Mm.
waiting for her dad to come. Like she remembers being 5 years old, sitting out on the porch, waiting, sitting on the suitcase, waiting for her dad, and he didn't show up. Yeah, that's some heartbreaking stuff.
All right, so from the top.
Right.
So I forgave my dad. I think that opened up a place in my heart and in my mind to deal with different things within my own life. And I didn't know what exactly.
Uh-huh.
Right? You would think I would know it's going to be me, but no, I wasn't. I didn't know. I'm just kind of still, when you've been surviving for so long, that's kind of where I'm at. But the way I dealt with my own issues was drinking. And when I moved to Texas, that's when I started drinking a lot more. The transition, the move, different life, like the whole thing, my dad,
Mhm.
and then all that stuff. So I just started drinking more, and I felt good when I drank. I felt optimal, right?
Yeah, I get it. You're talking about sober alcoholic. I get it.
Felt optimal.
It's a good word,
And
optimal.
I kind of didn't think much of anything else. I just moved through life working. I ended up, moving out with my dad, me and my girlfriend at the time. We got a place together. We lived together for 2 years. Then we broke up, and my brother called me out of nowhere, and he said that he needed a roommate, and he was married at the time. So I told him no. And then he called me again before the turn of 2017, and he said, I need a roommate. Me and, his then wife were getting a divorce. To a little bit of his backstory, he lost both his legs in Afghanistan, and he was already 5 years pretty much post being blown up. And when he asked me again, I had just been broken up with my ex at the time, and I told him, "Yeah, of course." It was perfect timing. And I
Yeah.
asked him where we gonna move. He said we can go back home. We can live on the coast. He's a little bit more well off now. Or we can move to Denver. And I asked him why Denver. And he said he wanted to come out here to make the US Paralympic sled hockey team.
Oh, cool.
And I told him, oh, that's a no brainer. So literally after that call, we hung up within a week. We both flew in to look at different places. The last place we saw, we signed the lease. We flew back, packed our stuff, and we came to Denver. I didn't know the transition would be as hard for me as it was. Like I had no idea. But this is, as he's competing, and long story short, with my brother, he ended up making the team in 2018. He won a gold medal in Pyeongchang, South Korea, and then he won another gold in
Wow.
2022. Um, so we were roommates. Come out here. In my mind, I was like, okay, I'll find a bartending gig. I'll just work and I'll do more of the same out here. I'll just drink, live,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
whatever. I'll figure it out. We'll see what happens. Um, and that was a recipe for disaster.
Mm-hmm.
I got into a deep depression out here. Like everything hit the fan and I didn't know. Like I couldn't tell you that it was because of my childhood trauma. I couldn't tell you because I hadn't reconciled those hard parts of my story within my story. And I just didn't know. Like I was lost. I was just hurting. All the issues that I had as a kid, like those hurts and those big hurts of deep betrayal from, my mom, my dad, and then the consistent violence to back that up in my life. Like this is just part of life. Like it hurts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I just started drinking a lot more. And I got into a very deep depression. I had never had suicidal thoughts before. And when I had those, it kind of rocked my world. It was like, man, this is tough. And I know that I've been through challenging moments in my own life, but that depression was the most challenging thing I'd ever been through. And it's not something you can fight with brute force. It's not something you can, you know, doesn't just go away. It's much more subtle on on how you approach that. I didn't know that though. Then I had never known. I couldn't even tell you what the definition of depression was or what the general gist of depression was because
Mm-hmm.
mental health wasn't even I didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm just in my own world, which is where you don't want to be.
Yeah.
I'm just in my
That's an
own world.
alcoholic. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to fight this emotional depression, this emotional hopelessness and feeling alone and destitute and hollow and all these things with drinking, with trying to forget about it. And it only made it worse. This is going on for months and I haven't told anybody else about it because I've also grow up, and there's still parts of that now that I still have where you don't talk about your emotions to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're going to be okay. And that works on the surface emotions, right? But when it's so deep, like you need to cry out for help. And unfortunately, that's really the only time a lot of men do, but that needs to be done proactively.
Yeah. Before it gets too bad that you really can't make that phone call or
Exactly.
reach out in some way.
Yeah,
I'm
you
glad
all
you
you
this
you
up.
gotta have somebody. You gotta have somebody to where you feel comfortable talking about what you're going through emotionally, you
So who
know?
did you reach out to? How did you get help?
Well, I wasn't going to reach out to anybody. I was just gonna I was just gonna take my own life.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's not because, oh, I'd rather take my own life than talk to somebody. It's just because that's just where I was at in the depression, you
That's what
know?
it does to the brain. Yes.
So being in that point, I was weeping at night, every night before I went to sleep. I was alone and the gentleman who I talked to last night, he described it like as like your soul is sick, your spirit is sick. It's
Yes.
that deep. And I got to a point where I'm going through the back and forth of, okay, it's not if I'm going to take my own life, it's when, because it's just because I can't see myself living like this long term, so I'd rather just end it now.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of guns in the house. My brother is a retired vet. And I remember him being gone and me looking at the guns, and I'm like, that'd be kind of messed up. He's been through enough,
Mm-hmm.
and then I go outside. We lived on the sixth floor, and I'm like, well, if I jump off of this, there's a chance I might live, right? 6 stories.
Mm-hmm.
But funny part of this is we had a friend who lived on like the 20th floor or 16th, high enough. I was like, okay, I'll just go to his house,
Mm-hmm.
just jump off of his
Jumper
window,
phase. Yeah.
right? And it's funny in hindsight, but going through a thought process like that and just being so low, you just want a way out. And that's what I was looking for. And I was going to do it. And one of the thoughts I had in my head was like, I know I've always been a fighter. And the thought, I construed that thought to be like, okay, you got to do this now.
Mm.
Don't be a coward. It essentially brought me to my knees internally, emotionally. Like I was just done. I was beat. And for me, in the 11th hour before I do take my own life, I figured, what does it cost me to cry out to God and see if there is something out there? Because if there's ever a time for me to like, this is it.
Yeah.
And I did cry out to God, and it's an emotional cry. It wasn't like I wasn't physically crying. It was just deep, deep down. And I felt in that moment, I felt that I got a response. I felt loved. I felt forgiven. I felt connected, and it was out of this world. And it changed my life. That moment for me is the catalyst for me being here. It is the catalyst for me still breathing, and all the other stuff is just icing on the cake. But one of the realizations that I had during that moment and during that process after that experience was that, okay, if my life matters, then my story matters just as much. A lot of times we we give in to this truth as humans that our lives have intrinsic value. But if you tell somebody, okay, well, what about your story? Oh, my story doesn't mean much. I don't really have a story.
Mm-hmm.
It's disconnected from the intrinsic value that they have. And I don't think that's true. I think those two are tied.
Yeah.
And I use that. I use that moment, right? Because that moment doesn't last forever. It's a moment, a brief
Yeah.
moment.
Yes. You got to grab that. Yep.
Yeah, I use that to remind me that, hey, that is the truth. That love that I felt, that
Yes.
is to me the ultimate reality. That is there. That is what upholds me. And not only that, that's also what's inside of me.
Yes.
And but I'm still like depressed, right? It doesn't I had that grand moment, emotional and spiritual moment, like
Mm-hmm.
that you're loved, that it's good, that you can live your life. And another realization that I had was that I can pursue my dreams again. That what my dreams were, that they're possible.
Yeah.
And that love made me believe that.
I'd call
Why
that divine intervention. I don't
yeah,
know what you call that.
divine and God made me believe,
Inspiration,
you know?
intervention. Yeah. That's how I got sober too. It was just like something happened. Yeah.
And so after that moment, I'm still depressed, but in that moment, I did that's when I started, like, sharing stories too. So, I was depressed when I initially started sharing stories, and hearing other people's stories and what they've been through helped lift me up,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
during that process. And
Yep.
after that moment too, that's when I finally started talking about what I was going through internally. I remember I told Ralph, I was like, "Hey, like, this is what I'm going through."
No, that's your brother,
Yeah.
Ralph. Yeah.
Yeah, I told him, I was like, "Hey, this is what I'm going through," and, I just like, I was about to take my own life. I'm depressed, and he was like, "Damn." He's like,
Mhm.
"I'm kinda feeling the same way."
Mm,
Right?
sure. Yes.
And this is a guy with 2 gold medals, an American hero, and it's like, anyone can feel these things regardless of what your accomplishments may be.
Yes.
And one of the reasons that I started talking about my story and what I was going through, like, I didn't read a book, I didn't understand anything about it, was the basic was like, well, I wasn't gonna be here. I don't have anything to lose at this point.
Mhm.
Like, this is the life that I have. This is just what I'm going through. It's just the truth.
Mhm.
And whatever anybody else thinks about it, great. That's on you. But it's primarily for me to get it out of my system and to own it and to not be a victim of my own story anymore because I really was. Like, I really saw my life as things were happening to me.
Sure. Yep, yep. I think most of us look at life that way as it's happening to us, and that so it sounds like you just got really empowered after that point.
I got really empowered and I had yeah, I had the pieces fell into place for me. After that point, I also told Ruff, I'm like, hey, he felt the back against the wall energy that
Mhm.
I had at that point. Like, hey, like my back's against the wall. Now I am fighting to stay alive and I'm holding on to dreams, to love, to the good things that you're supposed to
Yeah.
hold on to.
Yeah.
And Ralph could feel that. And he saw that. He saw me get sober. He saw me quit drinking. But he also saw the struggle there, the relapses in the beginning and all
Mhm.
that. And he was a witness to it. And when I told him, I was like, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to share stories. I want to travel across the states. I want to travel around the world. I want to share people's stories and get people to see what brings us together. And he said, I'll help you in that. So money wasn't an issue.
Mhm.
So we split. He was like, hey, whatever costs you have, I'll go 50-50 with you. Um, that was one, like, who gets that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Off the gate. And then, as far as the bug, I was like, hey, I want to write a book.
Wow.
And we just kept on rolling with it. And he was like, hey, you got skin in the game and I believe in what you're doing and I'm still doing it. And yeah, so that kind of is a little bit about my story.
What an important mission, Jose. I absolutely love it. And I love that you're talking about your depression. How do you see conversations around men talking about their mental health, mental illnesses, depression, anxiety, fear, trauma? And when you have conversations with men versus women, do you feel that maybe they hold back a little bit more, or there's still like a stigma out there? How do you feel about normalizing that conversation?
I think there still are expectations on how a man should conduct himself and on how a woman should conduct herself. It's more acceptable for a woman to be emotional than a man.
Yeah.
This is just a fact of society.
Yeah.
This is, and that fact seeps into how men are going to talk in public or talk to somebody else, including me. But you're not going to see me out in public talking about my emotions to just anybody,
Hmm.
but I will talk about them to a couple of people,
Hmm.
and before I didn't have that.
Hmm.
Before I didn't talk about it at all. I just bottled it all up and it blew up. And, by the grace of God, I'm still here. Um, but I think that men who do feel uncomfortable talking about their emotions, you got to have a couple people that you talk to them about. You really do. You got to have, it can be a friend, it can be a counselor, a therapist, it can be anybody that you trust
Hmm. Hmm.
to talk to and to be better because of it. You'd be surprised at how when someone is being honest about their emotions and just being themselves, people are 99% receptive to that. You got to find the safe places for you to go talk about your emotions. You got to know that you can talk about them. Um, and there's a ton of groups out there. There's a ton of places out there for you to do that. If you don't have a group to do that, if you don't have a friend to do that with, then my advice would be, and if you don't have the money to go to a therapist, because a lot of people don't, is to sit down and write it down.
And when I asked you who you've turned to, ultimately it was God
Yeah,
and your
yeah,
brother,
yeah,
right? A human.
yeah.
But we always have God or higher power, spirit, universe, whatever you want, source, whatever you want to call it, nature, whatever, just something greater than you that you believe loves you, right? That was the main message that you
Mhm,
got from your divine intervention was I am loved and this love is inside of, and then it motivates, inspires, empowers you to go do something purposeful, which is what you've done. And so, yeah, so even if you don't have anybody, and I'm sure people listening to this, if you wanted to reach out to Jose, I'm sure you would talk to people and help people too. But um, always can turn to God. He wants you to. She wants you to. Whatever you believe God is, wants you to reach out and accept the love. That's the whole
mhm,
reason we're here on the planet. That's why we all have these stories of this pain and situations. I don't care what anybody says. You could have the best childhood in the world. There's still pain there. If you're a
mhm,
human being, there's some pain in there, especially with the state of the world. You can't be living on planet Earth right now and not be feeling something. Um, so the pain, the trauma could be the catalyst to get you into that healing. And you're talking about the stigma around men that they shouldn't be as emotional. You know, there is so much strength in vulnerability. Like that is the ultimate strength. And when you, as a man, not you particular, but listeners, show that, put that out there, let other people see that. You are then inspiring and motivating other people and to help them to feel safe. Well, if he did it, right? People saying, if Jose can do it, maybe I can do it too, right? If they feel similar to how you used to feel.
mhm.
Um, we are meant to be examples, power of example to people. I believe that's why there's more than one human being walking the planet, is because we're supposed to be showing other people, guiding, leading, because we are, I call it, say, big G, little g, we are little gods. And we are supposed to be, I want to write a book someday called We Are All Prophets. We're all supposed to be doing this kind of healing work to then show other people that it's possible. And you don't have to be ashamed. You don't have to carry the guilt. We're just all human beings. We are all one story. We are all the same. We all have these similar emotional undercurrents to go back to, the particular feelings and emotions that, like we're just like in an ocean together. Like I feel like I'm seeing like an ocean. Like we're all just kind of riding the waves, riding the waves. Some of us are like they're bigger, cresting, and everything is great. And then some are just kind of riding it out. But like rolling it together. And I
Mhm.
think that is such an important message of the work that you do is that you're not alone. Whatever you've gone through, somebody else most likely has gone through and has found their way through. So yes, reaching out to those couple of people will start it. It'll jumpstart it, right? And those people could say, "Oh, read this book, or call this person, or go to this support group," or right. It's just you got to take that first step to then
Mhm,
open the door for more opportunities and information to come to you. That and you just follow those. I call them spiritual breadcrumbs, right? And spiritual
mhm.
bread, just follow those breadcrumbs, and then eventually one day you turn around and you're Jose traveling the country and interviewing people and leaving a mark, making a difference.
Yeah, I agree. I think you take that first step and then you get that next step. But you got to take that first step. Like you as well, we had those spiritual experiences. But after that, I wasn't left alone. I wasn't left without tools. I wasn't left without
Yes.
resources or friends.
Yes.
I had the catalyst. Now, okay, these are the things. that I have to do to upkeep my well-being. One of the first things I did was start talking about my childhood. I started
All goes back to childhood.
it
It
was
all goes
weird.
back to childhood. The therapists are not wrong.
I was
All
like,
back to childhood.
yeah, I'm telling Ralph and he's looking, I'm like, yeah, like, this really hurt me. And and,
Yeah.
you know, and that's a part of what saved my life. It wasn't just that love, like that is the heart, but it's also other
Yeah.
human beings who listened.
Yes.
And then all the other stuff that comes with that. I journal pretty much every day and stuff like
Mhm.
that. Like I have to upkeep my wellness. But
Yeah.
you know, I'm
Tell us quick because we're near the end here. What do you do? Do you meditate? You pray, right?
I journal
For
usually,
example, your
about
main.
97, 98% of every morning, and every time I get up, I journal. And what I do specifically, I'll read a verse from the Bible. My favorites are Psalms, the uplifting ones, right? And I just let the love that's coming from those words into my heart. I believe that what it says about me, that I am loved, that I am a child of God. And I try and live my life from that, from that place of not just those words, but those words for me are backed by that experience. And
Mm.
it kind of always reminds me that one, I am safe now. And the way I move through the world is from that, trying to move from that point and letting love in and then
Yeah.
loving in return.
Letting it in, allowing. The word allow came to me this morning. I don't know about you, but I can be like the ultimate self sabotager. Life is going like really well right now. I'm going to find a way to like mess it up. I'm really, really good at that. But yes, just allowing the goodness, allowing the love. I say, let life be good. Let life be good. We don't have to
Mm.
suffer anymore. We don't have to struggle. I do believe that a certain amount of struggling and suffering is necessary for the darkness to look at the shadow, right? We have to be in some kind of pain to then come into the light. But once you've done that, we don't have to stay in that darkness. Like we don't have to keep ourselves in any unnecessary pain because then it's keeping us out of doing the work that we're meant to do here,
Mm.
which is being loved, right? And showing other people that they are loved, not just loved, they are loved. And when you truly feel that in your heart and in your soul, you're not looking for all, it's nice to be loved and we need people in our lives, of course, but we're not so like desperate for it.
Mm.
Energy just shifts. And that's where that emotional freedom comes in. Use the word free. Like that's where that freedom comes in. So that's
Amen.
important. Somebody told me once I should be a minister or a preacher or something. I was like, I don't know about that. Not quite yet.
You're a
Um,
preacher of sorts. I think we all are, right?
we
Prophets,
are
right? Yeah.
prophet. We
Yeah.
are carrying the good word, the hands, the feet, all that.
Mm.
So is there any last bits of wisdom or anything that inspiration, anything you want to, a favorite quote you like, or anything that you kind of carry with you that you want to share before we sign off?
You know, yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking that. I mean, I wasn't expecting this.
Yeah, sorry. I don't really like prime my guests very well. I probably should.
But one of the things I always tell myself is that in the end, love always wins, and I take peace in that. That's one of the things that I guess a mantra, right? That love wins, and when I go to sleep at night, like regardless of what happens, it's good. Like it's gonna be okay.
Yeah. 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 If you look hard enough, there's always something to be grateful for. There's always something good. Just being alive, just breathing, right? That's beautiful, Jose. So where can people find you? Where can they buy your book? Go buy Jose's book. It will touch you in a million ways. So tell us where they can find you.
Yeah, you can purchase the book on our website at weareallonestory.net. You can follow our work at We Are All One Story. That's Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Um, yeah, and if you want to reach out, you can message us through any of those platforms.
I'll put all that information in the show notes for our listeners to reach out and connect. Awesome, Jose. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank
You're
you.
appreciate it.